Please forgive me. I'm sorry for all the confusion, problems. Let's see. So we were just reading from this verse from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Let's look at it again. Kayena vacha manasadriyaiva budyatmana vanusritya svabhavat. That whatever one does with his kayena vacha manasadri, with their body, their words, their mind, they should offer that to the Lord. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, in his commentary, the BBT purport, explains that someone who does that, don't think that person's like an ordinary karmi, although their activities may look like it. Rather, they're doing something for the pleasure of the Lord. It may be a little bit distant. And I want to speak something about that also as we're going along. So Krishna says this in the Gita also, said, that whatever you eat, whatever you do, whatever austerity you should offer this to me. So there's many statements about this. I'm just trying to contemplate which ones we want to actually do. In his Bhakti Sundarbha, Jiva Goswami gives a prayer to offer all the different activities. Let's look at that prayer. Iti padmuktena prakarena cha mama sukarmani duskarmani yad raga samanyam tat sarvato bhavena bhagavadvishayam eva bhavatva iti samedhyayam. So the devotee, he prays that whatever attraction that I have, sukarmani, duskarmani, whether it's for pious things or impious things, sinful things, let all of that, Bhagavat Vishayam Eva Bhavatu Iti Samadhiya, may I dedicate that to Krishna. Kamanim tu na sarvartayava saivaduskaram arpanam. Arpanam, may I offer all of this to the Supreme Lord. Now that's very unusual comment, isn't it? We don't offer sinful things to the Lord. We don't offer our materialistic desires and things to the Lord. So what is being said here? We should encourage everyone to do things for the pleasure of the Lord. If someone can't control their senses, then Krishna in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, he says that in some cases, that someone has some taste for Krishna Katha, which has risen in their heart, but they have some attraction for other things, and still they should go on doing those things. Jata Shradama Katha Su. Thank you, Krishna Kun. They should just go on offering their results to Krishna. And gradually those desires will be burned up. Now, what's being spoken of here is not Sudha Bhakti. Because Sudha Bhakti means that we're doing something for the pleasure of Krishna through the medium of Guru. If someone's attached to eating meat, to use the grossest example I can think of, but that person understands that God is there and that I should offer it, he's offering it in his mind. Krishna doesn't like to eat those things. You can't offer that to Guru. It's a completely nasty thing. But offering that thing in his mind is much better than the person who doesn't. And gradually, that person who's offering it in that way, they'll make some advancement. They'll become a little purified because they understand that oh, I should offer everything to the Lord. And then gradually, maybe they'll start thinking, well, what would the Lord like? Now, bhakti begins when we offer things to Guru, and Guru gives us certain rules. And Guru is telling us 4 regulated principles. You don't offer meat. You don't do these things. You follow 4 regulated principles. But here are acharyas, and there's many statements from Sridhar Swami, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srimad Bhagavatam, a few places. Bhakti Sandarbha, Hari Bhakti Vilas, how persons who can't control their senses, they should offer those activities to the Lord. And in particular, as we know from this Jata Karma, from this verse from the 11th, Jata Shadama Kata Suverse, that we should lament about it, that I can't give up these things. This is for the devotees. Krishna's saying this is bhakti. I can't give up these things, but I can't give them up. So please, Krishna, you please help me. And lamenting like that will help them. Our program is not a program of renunciation. Let me share with you a few statements in this regard. First is a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Himavati. Himavati was Hamsadutta Prabhu's wife, and this is a letter written in 1972. Himavati heard some news that Hamsadutta had taken sannyas, or was going to take sannyas. And so she went to shave her head and put on white because she thought that's what you're supposed to do. And Prabhupada wrote back to her, wrote her a letter. I don't know who's given you this idea of shaving your head and wearing white garments. In India, only the widows are allowed to shave their head. I've never suggested your husband take sannyas. We can discuss this matter further when we meet in London for Rath Yatra. You should remain the beautiful maidservant of Krishna. That's your business. And you should dress yourself always very nicely so that Krishna, by seeing you, will be pleased. Don't try to be ugly before Krishna. Krishna doesn't like ugly gopis. Prabhupada said, Krishna doesn't like ugly gopis. We are transcendental artists, musicians, writers, so everything should be beautiful for Krishna. And Prabhupada goes on to explain like this. So we don't cultivate renunciation. Of course, in India, widows wear white, and there's many ladies in our society who do that, and even sometimes they shave their head in that. And that's a traditional thing. But it's not that this artificial renunciation is something we cultivate. Sometimes I tell the story of one of my godbrothers. I'm trying not to speak very much about him, but he was bragging to us once how renounced he was. And he's a married person. He said, I don't even look at my wife. I'm so renounced. And he said, once a month, Guru Maharaj told me I can touch her on the shoulder or something. And very strangely, a month after that, she became pregnant. I don't know, he had a special touch on his shoulder or something. But let's read from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is from Bhakti Alok, where he speaks about association between husband and wife. He said one should not associate with women. But on the other hand, when a woman is engaged in sadhana bhakti, similarly, she shouldn't associate with men. Associating with the opposite sex is very inauspicious for the advancing devotee. And then he says there are two types of men and women. And when they're married, according to religious principles, there's no sin and they're touching and talking with each other. Rather, this touching and talking is beneficial because of the scriptural sanction. However, there is no provision for illusory activities other than the execution of reciprocal duties. If they're illusioned by each other and they engage in activities other than prescribed duties, that's called Stri Sangha, Purush Sangha, association with the opposite sex. So if the wife is helpful in her bhakti, then this fault of Stri Sangha doesn't arise. But if the wife is an impediment to bhakti, then one should carefully give up her association. With that comment, carefully meaning that one should take care of her, not just artificially renounce. Prabhupada wrote a letter to one devotee saying, I do not think it's a good idea that you take sannyas while your wife is pregnant. He said, that will not be a very popular idea in our movement. So devotees are crazy, because we were speaking this some recently in New Brajadam about the Bahirmukh Janas and the Antarmukh Janas, external persons and internal persons. The external persons tend to judge everything by the externals, what kind of cloth you wear, what color, are they celibate, how much do they sleep, how much do they eat, and that's an advanced person accordingly. And there's some things to be said about that. Prabhupada says some strong things about fat devotees in one purport in the Bhagavatam. Somebody is Not muted. Please, everybody mute himself. His background. The door just closed. Please mute yourself. So Bhaktivinoda goes on, for a household devotee, touching and speaking to his wife in the above-mentioned manner is not detrimental to devotional service. But for renunciate, there can't be any type of talking or touching of a woman. Otherwise, his practice of bhakti will be completely spoiled. Association with such a deviated person should be totally rejected. Alexander Prabhu, I just saw your comment. That's another discussion. Maybe I'll try to touch on your comment later. Would take some time for me to try to comment on. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, though, was a grihastha, and he said nice things about grihasthas. But let's look at Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said. This is from Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. He said, do not see your fathers and mothers as a means to your own sense gratification, but you should see them as Krishna's fathers and mothers. Don't see your sons or daughters, your children, as a means to your personal enjoyment, but see them as belonging to the group of servitors of Bala Gopal. Engage your eyes in seeing the Kadamba tree, the river Jamuna in its sandy bank, the beauty of the full moon. Then you won't have any more mundane feelings. You'll see Golok. The splendor of Golok will be manifest in your home. Hence, you'll not have any material feelings for your home. You'll be relieved from propensities for ordinary household life. This is our system. Everything is positive. We focus on bhakti, and then everything else comes automatically. There's many statements like we could read about these things from Srila Prabhupada, from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, etc. I don't want to go so much into that. But there's a story I was contemplating to share with you in this regard. In the Sri Sampradaya, there's some 12 famous different devotees who are known as the Alwars or Dibya Suris, divine persons. And they're considered to be manifestations, partial manifestation of the Lord, his weapons, his clothing, or different associates of the Lord. And one of those was known as Tandarapati Alwar, who was born in a Brahmin family in South India. He was named Vipra Narayan. And I'd like to just share a little something about him. If you read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 9, text 79, Srila Prabhupada mentions something about this great devotee. So Vipra Narayan, as a young boy, he received all the different sanskaras, the mundan, the haircutting ceremony, upanayana, the Gayatri mantra and everything. He was trained and very learned in the four Vedas, and he was very saintly from the beginning of his life. He was never interested in women, never interested in marriage. And one day, as a young man, he went on Tirtha Yatra to visit Sri Rangam. And when he saw the beauty of Lord Ranganath there, Vipanarayan decided, I want to stay here for the rest of my life and serve the Lord. So he stayed there, and he started cultivating a garden. He became a gardener, and he was growing flowers and tulsi for the deity. So nearby, there was a prostitute named Deva Devi who was living. And in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, they consider her to be a heavenly damsel who came to this world from Indraloka, and they consider her that she was Divyangana, this inconceivably beautiful woman. She was a favorite of the local king, Maharaj Chola. And so on one occasion, she was returning from the palace with her sister and a few girlfriends. And she went to the flower garden of Vipra Narayan. She was a little tired. So she sat down underneath a shade tree and was resting. And they were watching, they saw this Vipra Narayan, and he's going around. And he was so simple. He was so focused. It's just for him, there was only two things. There were flowers, and there were things which were not flowers. And flowers were what he was picking for his service uh, for the Lord, and non-flowers are something he didn't care about. So he was going, and that he would just look, flower, flower, flower. He'd pick that, he'd see a tree branch, not a flower. And then he came by David Davy and her friends, and he was picking flower, and he saw these girls, not a flower, and he just went on. That was his only comment. And David Davy was such a Maya Devi was so beautiful and things. She wasn't used to men who were like that. And so she asked her sister, what's wrong with this guy? Is he crazy? Or maybe he's just a eunuch. He's not really a man at all. And his sister said, no, I know about him. He's a sadhu. He's not crazy and he's not lacking in his masculinity or anything. He's not interested in your charms and smiles and your curves and your curly hair. And he said, actually, and she could see that it was really agitating David Davy because a beautiful girl wants to be attractive to all men. So her sister told her, look, I can see this bothers you. So I'll make a wager with you. If you consider yourself to be the most beautiful of women. So if you can attract him, if you can attract this sadhu, then I'll agree, I'll become your slave for 6 months. And David Davies said, okay. And if I fail to do that, then I'll become your slave for 6 months. So then she took off all of her jewelry and her ornaments and things, and she gave them to her sister and said, you go home. I'll see you later on. And so after they'd left, David Davy, she put herself on the pathway right in front of Vipra Narayan. And she was crying very piteously. That's the weapon of a woman. And when Vipra Narayan saw, he's not used to women. He's been a brahmachari his whole life. And he saw this girl piteously crying like she was going to die or something. And he was, are you okay? Why are you crying? What's wrong? And she says, my mother, she wanted to make money. So she was selling me for different lusty men. And I've done so many sinful things. I have a very, very fallen birth. But I heard you're a saintly person. I have nowhere to go. No one will accept me. Please, please, God, help me. Please accept me. And I don't ask anything from you. Just every day when you take your flowers to Ranganath, I'll look after the garden while you're gone. And Vipra Narayan, he's a very simple guy. Well, that's great. Sure, no problem. He was a very, very simple. So for 6 months, she patiently served him every day, not touching him, not doing anything, just humbly serving very nicely. And one day, during the monsoon season, there was a heavy rain. And David Davy became soaking wet. And she didn't have any raincoat or umbrella or anything. She was shivering and soaking wet, but she wasn't stopping. She was still pulling weeds and doing her gardening work. And Vipa Narayan was sitting in his cottage with the roof over his head, watching, no rain on him. And he sees this poor woman out there shaking and soaking wet. And he felt sorry for her. And he said, you should come to my hut. Previously, she'd not come to his hut. You come to my hut. And so next thing you know, she's standing next to him in her dripping wet sari. And he felt, seeing how cold and miserable she was, he said, well, here, I have some dry clothes. You can put on some of my clothes. And so she changed her clothes. And then she started thinking, this is good time. It's raining outside. Here we are. It's very private. His mind's not thinking of anything. This is the best time. And she said, my dear Lord, I'm just your servant. Could I massage your feet? And Vipra Narayan said, well, go right ahead. So she started massaging his feet and speaking very sweet words and looking at him in a very charming kind of way and things. And finally, Vipra Narayan's, he lost all of his shyness and lust took a hold of him. And he forgot about his service. He forgot about his bhajan, and he embraced her. And they had some enjoyment. David Davy taught him all the different arts of Cupid. And then as soon as that happened, she sent a messenger, to her sister, send me my jewelry and my opulent clothes. And she then really displayed her charms in such a way that Vipra Narayan became her slave. Some persons have said that for a woman to conquer over a brahmachari or sannyasi is like the ultimate thing, because it means I'm more attractive than even the Lord himself. So she won this bet with her sister, and then she took everything that Vipra Narayan had, and she left him and she went home. And Vipra Narayan was heartbroken. This poor guy, never been with a woman before, and now he had this love affair and things. And so he went after her and sat at her doorstep, and she just wouldn't even open the door for him, and just abuse him, say bad things, go away, you're not wanted, you're useless and things. And so he was just sitting there, this poor guy, like a lost puppy or something, outside of her door for several days. And one day, Lord Ranganath and Lakshmi Devi, his consort, the deities, were going by in a procession. And Lakshmi Devi, she looked over and she saw Vipra Narayan sitting by David Devi's door. And she asked Lord Ranganath, who is this? What's going on? And Lord Ranganath said, you don't recognize him? This is our old servant, Vipra Narayan. He used to bring us all kinds of flowers and garlands. And now look, now he doesn't have anything left, and his lover has rejected him. And Lakshmi Devi, who has a very soft heart, she said, my Lord, are you just going to, when your devotees start suffering and they have problems, are you just going to reject them? Even if he's done some sin, you have to bring him back to your service. And Lord Ranganath, he just smiled. He said, I know. I don't forget my devotees. He said, you watch and see how I'm going to do this. So the procession finished. The deities went back inside the temple. A few hours later, there was a knock on David Dasi's door. And up until then, Vipra Narayan had been beating on the door constantly, but she was ignoring it. But this knock sounded different. So she opened the door, and there was a young, handsome young man there. And she said, well, who are you? And he said, oh, I'm the humble servant of Vipra Narayan. And my name is Ranga. And Vipra Narayan told me that I should bring you this golden plate. So for the prostitute, a golden plate. Oh, that's very, very good. She said, where's my dear Vipra Narayan? Oh, he's just right here waiting to see you. And so the messenger went to the Vipra Narayan, was sitting there very depressed, and said, here's your David Devi. She's waiting for you, open arms, go and enjoy it with her. So Vipra Narayan jumped up and was embracing David Devi again. He was very, very happy. And then that messenger disappeared, that young boy. So the next morning, this is a story which also similar stories are told in Jagannath Puri. When they went to wake up the deity of Lord Ranganath, they opened the temple. The priest found that his very valuable golden plate was gone. And so it was a big thing, and they were searching what had happened to this thing. And it just so happened, the king, he ordered that you should arrest all the priests and all the persons who are working in the temple who are close to because the golden plate's worth a lot. So then one of David Davies' maidservants happened to be going by the jail, where those men were being kept, and she saw her boyfriend there. So she asked him what was going on, and he told her this lost plate and da, da. And then that maidservant said, well, this Vipra Narayan, he brought a golden plate to David Devi, and she's been hiding it under a pillow. So when they got that information, they informed the police or whatever, and they went there and they arrested both the David Devi, the prostitute, and Vipra Narayan. They brought them both before the king. The king, who was very attached to David Devi, he became angry, and he asked, how can you be so low class? You steal Lord Ranganath's plate. And she became frightened, because you don't mess with the king. They'll put you on the Tanga or something, and you'll die a very miserable death, full of suffering. She said, no, I'm just your servant. I don't know where I didn't know this plate belonged to the Lord. It was this man here, this Vipra Narayan. It was this Vipra Narayan, his servant Ranga. He sent it with his servant named Ranga. I didn't know any of this. And so then the king, he shouted at Vipra Narayan. He said, "What do you say about this?" And Vipra Narayan, he said, I don't know anything about this plate, but would you, there's some pillows over there in the corner. You'll make me feel more peaceful. Uh, he said, I don't know anything about that. And so the king locked Vipra Narayan up in jail. We're telling the story about this Alwar, Vipra Narayan. And that night, Lord Ranganath, who's the Lord, he's famous as Bhaktivatsala, and he loves his devotees. He came in a dream to the king and told him, I took the plate. And I went to the prostitute and I gave it on behalf of Vipra Narayan. I did this to help my devotee. So you should release him from prison, give him back his previous service, which is very dear to us. And so the king immediately released Vipra Narayan and begged for any offenses or anything. And when Vipra Narayan realized that the Lord personally had delivered him in this way, he began to cry. And he felt very, very guilty and very terrible. And he gave up all of his lusty desires. And with twice the intensity, he started doing it again, his services, growing flowers and things for the Lord and doing his bhajan. And very soon he became his normal self. And because of this, he is known as Tandari Dapodi, or the dust of the lotus, of the devotee's feet. And Deva Devi, the prostitute, when she heard what had happened to Vipra Narayan, she became astonished. I understand. And then her association with Vipra Narayan bore its fruit, even though what was their association? It wasn't according to the regulated principles, but she had at least part of it. But she had some association with him, and he was a very saintly person up until he started engaging in bad activities with her. So she gave up her activities of being a prostitute, and she gave all of her possessions to the deity and the Brahmins, and she became a saintly person also. So therefore, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami says, Ya kenapyati bhagyena jata shraddhosya sevane nati sakto navairagya bhagasyam adhikarya so. That someone, this is the qualification, the adhikari for Vaidhi Bhakti, is that someone is not too much attached to material objects and not too detached from them either. And they have by some good fortune, atibhagyena, jata shraddho sasevane, they have some faith which has arisen from association with devotees, in particular, jata shraddha katasu, navina sarva karmas, they have some faith in Hari Katha. And a number of places the Bhagavatam describes it. It's this taste in Hari Katha, which is really the beginning of our spiritual life. And devotees, we should be focused on bhakti. And all these other things are not so very, very important. So I don't know why, but it's telling me again, we've got 10 minutes. This is really disturbing to my mind. There's a lot of other things we were going to go over, but we have this Zoom account which someone just paid for, and I just registered with it this morning, and it seems to be working, but now we're on the free one, so I don't know why. Anyway, Alexander Prabhu, you commented, let me read your comment. In the Bhagavad Gita, souls are divided into two categories, eternally liberated and eternally conditioned. Nitya Buddha, Nitya Mukta. In Madhva, the nature of the soul is assembly determined. Not everyone can attain moksha. Some are doomed to hell, and some are eternally trapped in samsara. Does this correlate with this verse that not everyone is ready to accept the higher goal, taste, and this is conditioned forever? And who was it I was reading from? It's Jiva Goswami. I think it was Jiva Goswami, yeah. Where Jiva Goswami says, we don't agree with Madhvacharya about everything. There's certain, and in particular, this thing about the eternally conditioned souls, that's something we don't agree with. It's a different subject matter than what Narottam Das Thakur is speaking about here. Why don't I go ahead and read the verse again, and then we can maybe, if there's any questions or comments, I have 7 or 8 minutes or something for it. Vishaya Garlamoya Tahimana Shuka Choya Se Na Shuka Duka Koriman Govinda Vishaya Ras Sangha Koro Tanra Das Prema Bhakti Satya Kori Jhana. Material enjoyments are full of poison, but you consider them pleasing. Do not think of them as a source of happiness, but understand them as distress. Be absorbed in full thought of Govinda, associate with his devotees, and conclude that loving devotional service is the goal of life. This is such an important thing. We should have our goal very firmly fixed in front of us. And even as we were hearing in the story about Vipra Narayan and others, even if someone becomes distracted from that, don't worry about it. Don't lament about it. Don't waste any time. Just be completely fixed. That we can lament, we can cry that oh, I'm so fallen. But as my grandmothers would sometimes say, your only qualification is your disqualification. We have to cry to Krishna. And that crying is our only qualification. Owning and admitting our fallen position is our only qualification. So I'm stopping there. And according to my little clock here, I've got 7 minutes and 19 seconds. Anybody want to make any comments or anything? Share anything? Dharmata Prabhu, you came a little late, but anything? Okay. You know, when I see Dharmata Prabhu, don't mind me, I'm not trying to glorify you, but I think of Gopi Pranardhana Prabhu because you were serving him. And I wish when you come in, especially in the middle of a class, I'm always like, oh, I better pronounce the Sanskrit correctly. And I always remember how once I went to the Krishna Balaram Mandir and Bhagavatam class is going on. And honestly, sometimes the classes are not always what we would hope them to be. And I couldn't see who was speaking. I didn't recognize the voice, but I could hear them reciting the Sanskrit shlok, and the pronunciation was so nice and very much different than what you generally hear. And I was, wow, who's this sounds really good. And they came in and it was Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. It was giving the class. Gorni Sai Prabhu, do you want to share something?
Yeah. Hare Krishna Prabhu. You mentioned that this Krishna Katha is a very powerful practice to listen, to speak about Krishna Katha, which we are practicing here. And I understand that there are three types of Krishna Katha if we speak about Vraja Krishna. The one is when he is killing demons, the other is when he's meeting and enjoying the, the association of his pure devotees, different devotees, mother, friends, gopis. And the third one is when he leaves them or he's not with them, means when they are just suffering because of his absence. So would you like to explain these three type of katas, which type of anatas they remove or which type of advancement they help in devotees?
Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, I'm trying to remember the technical phrase he uses, something krama. When he speaks about the path of hearing, maybe Lila Purushottam Prabhu might remember this, but I think he can't make comments right now. Sudha, one is
Krama
purely
Sudha,
Krama Sudha.
Krama Sudha,
Krama,
Kramahina and Krama
yeah,
Sudha.
Kramahina and Krama Sudha Shravana. Hearing in a pure way and in an impure way. So kramahina means that we're hearing some things, but we're not hearing in a proper way. Not hearing in a proper way means what? Are we going to analyze the subject matter and determine which is proper and which is improper? You can't do that. Therefore, sadhu speaks Shastra, and he or she does it according to the adhikar of the individuals and their particular inclination. So kramahina means when someone's not considering that. And they may be speaking about Rasa Shastra, they may be speaking about the gopis and this thing and that, and they may be doing it in a very expert, nice way. But if the audience is not qualified for that, then that's Kramahina Shravana Dasa. That's the phrase, Kramahina Shravana Dasa. That's inappropriate hearing. You're not hearing properly because the medicine is not the right medicine for you. Kramasuda Shravana Dasa means we're hearing the appropriate thing. And Bhaktivinoda says that there means also some Krishna Katha, direct Krishna Katha, something about Krishna's pastimes. Now, as far as in distinguishing between speaking about Krishna's devotees, speaking about Krishna's Braj Leela, speaking about Krishna's pastimes of leaving, going to Dwarka and other places, and how those particularly affect devotees and how they may, what anarthas they may or may not deliver, that's completely subjective. That's completely individual, according to the potency of the speaker, according to the adhikar of the listener, according to how attentive the listener is, how reflective the listener is in contemplating upon it. And they may get a very powerful result from hearing just Bhagavad Gita from such a powerful person. And on the other hand, if they're hearing about the Ras Leela, but they're not hearing properly, and they don't have adhikar for that, then it may do very little for them. On the other hand, we hear at the end of the Ras Leela that if someone hears these activities properly with faith, then it destroys the anarthas in the heart. But the main thing is we're hearing properly. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his commentary on the first verse of Shikshastakam says there's different types of faith. And basically Lokik Shraddha, or common faith, and Paramartik Shraddha, or transcendental faith. Of Paramartik Shraddha, he says there are two basic divisions. Shastra Avadarnamoyi Shraddha, and Bhagavat Lila Madhurya Lobamoyi Shraddha. The first is faith which is based on Shastra. And it's something where you're reading. And that faith, Bhaktivinoda says, is based on fear, in the sense I have to follow rules and regulations and do this and that. Whereas Bhagavat Lila Madhurya Lobamoyi Shraddha is characterized by the word loba, or greed. And that comes by hearing direct Krishna Katha from a saintly person. Now, how deep that Krishna Katha is not, it's not a matter of information, but it's a matter of the depth of the heart of the individual. And someone may just describe the simplest thing about Krishna's face, and they may begin crying in ecstasy. And the person listening to that, oh my gosh, that touches their heart very deeply. Whereas someone else, a university professor, may give a class and speak about the Ras Leela, which is a much more intimate pastime, but it doesn't touch the heart of the person. And therefore, in the Skanda Purana, there's also a description given of different speakers, which Jiva Goswami divides into basically two different categories, Surag Bhaktas and Nirag Bhaktas, or speakers with material desires and without material desires. If someone's speaking with material desires, but they're repeating what they've heard from Sadhu Guru, they're repeating things from Shastra, then there's some benefit. On the other hand, if we're hearing from someone